Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So today we are going to be reacting to Compulsive Rambler's video on the history of the compromising of NEDA, the National Blinking Disorders Association. The reason why this is important to talk about is because NIDA is the organization that is giving YouTube the advice on what to censor. So it is why anti-fat acceptance is really struggling at the moment, why there's a wave of demonetizations, why there's a wave of videos getting removed, and why we can't talk about downsizing. So this is a very activistic video. It's very important to talk about, especially for those of us that are fireflies on the channel, if you catch my drift, those of us who want to get to a place where obesity isn't taking over the whole world. So it's very important for us to understand NIDA. As far as the Last of Us metaphor that I use often for this fight, NIDA is basically Fedra, okay? If you understand that game or that movie, or not movie, that show, Fedra is like this organization that's very oppressive. That is NIDA. NIDA is an oppressive organization that has started out probably somewhat with good intentions, but it has completely twisted. And it seems like NIDA is just in this position where they're pissing everybody off, basically. So I am going to be taking Compulsive Rambler's advice, and I'm going to slow it down just a touch because I agree. She was saying that she speaks fast and her accent, the accent, she's Britishy. Not all of my Americans are like me. They don't understand the way that I do. They're not as cultured. They're not as they haven't had a brat era. About era. Oh my god, I messed up. Era. Sorry. Whoops, I slipped there. Ooh, even I've lost it. But anyway, they all haven't had a brat era like I did. So I'm just going to slow it down just a touch. But obviously, go check out Compulsive Rambler's channel. She has a lot of great videos. And yeah, she gets really into the nitty gritty of all this stuff. So go subscribe. But let's go ahead and get started. 1 second. Okay.
And it's all the same stuff you hear today. Dieting rarely works. 95% of all dieters regain their lost weight and more within 1 to 5 years. Dieting can be dangerous. Dieting forces your body into STAV, you know what I mean, ASIAN mode. Nowhere does it mention anything about how to ask your doctor if you are actually overweight or not. No mention that that's even a thing. Next time the dieting desire crosses your mind, take a time out. Think about the reasons why you want to lose weight. Sure, that's fine. Are they really worth it? Think about the potential dangers of dieting. No, think about, are you actually overweight or not?
Right.
How is it possible for the same
Oh my gosh. So I read this on, she sent this to me on Instagram, and I read this for my members. It was atrocious. It was atrocious. I was very angry when I was reading it. Actually more angry than I like to be, because it was so awful. It's really bad. And it basically, to sum it up in a very short sentence, this person basically said that downsizing is not a part of recovery from bingo, which replaced the O with an E, which is disgusting. And there's so much conflation with basically, gosh, how do I even say this? Non-P people talking to Mia, which I think they might have gotten rid of that distinction, but I really think that they shouldn't, because the advice is not, you have to think about the correction of these issues. They require balance. So there is a slight shift with all the different problems. So if somebody is playing bingo, but they're also very, very reductive to the point where it's balancing things out, not healthfully, obviously, then that's not quite being within bingo. Or it's not talking to bingo. It's more like talking to Mia, you know? And I think that that's a very important distinction because they focus so much on the reduction, which typically within bingo, you're not very reductive. I mean, let's just call it what it is. You're not, and you are overweight because caloric realism is a thing. If you are constantly playing bingo and nothing is done, obviously, which I do not condone stuff like that at all, just for the record, you will upsize. Okay? I have to be kind of careful about how I talk about this. But they're trying to deny caloric realism. So they're trying to act like anybody can have bingo at any size. That's not true. You have to at least be chubby. You know, there is a criteria. You have to be playing bingo at least once a week. And I mean, like, we're playing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got a lot going on. You're having thousands of cows. Okay, it's not like oh my gosh, I had the whole box of cookies. That's not a bingo. That's like not what we're talking about. We're talking like something's going on. And you do that at least once a week for 3 months, you're going to have upsized a bit. So we're losing it here. And a lot of the interventions or help in terms of bingo, it's completely neglected to the point where she states to downsize is not a part of a treatment plan, which is insane to me. That is absolutely nuts. And it's the same thing as saying that somebody talking to Anna should not have to upsize. That's insane. So it is just horrifying. It was just horrifying.
Have a page like this on bed fringe eating disorder, as we have to call it, because of the censorship this charity recommends, in which it says it is never a good idea to consume fewer calories, ever. Also has people saying things like this about it.
Why is NEDA fatphobic?
The history of NIDA, anti-fatness and NIDA.
I grieved when NIDA harmed me and I stepped back from NIDA. I have people all up in my comments saying what do I do with my NIDA tattoo? I want to get it off of me. I want to get it covered up.
It's very clear that obesity is a very serious problem.
Evelyn Ater, fatphobic.
It remains a growing problem.
And I said, how do you support folks with eating disorders? And the third thing was that it could give healthy eating tips. Yeah, sure, give someone some healthy eating tips. But if someone with an eating disorder, that's how every eating disorder began.
Some of these screenshots that have gone out there.
So that actually pisses me off for her to say that, because that's not even true. It usually begins with, again, I'll say it 20,000 times because it's required, because they say this so often. It begins with extreme physical stress and or trauma. That's where it begins. It is then, there's also likely a genetic predisposition, which that's really just a sense of neuroticism that's inherited. It's something innate to the person, and it becomes focused upon their body, basically. And it's control seeking. That's basically what it is. That's where it comes from. So typically how it starts is, I don't like how I look. That's how it starts. That's where it actually begins. Because let me tell you, people that are within the TR, or the toxic ritualistic, as I call it, I call it that. We all have different terms. When you're within that, you're not concerned about your health. So that's not at all. Healthy eating tips is not at all where it starts. It's always appearance-based. That's where it starts. You might have a certain moment of, oh, I was stressed, so I didn't have anything that day. Or, oh, I was stressed, so I had a comfort meal. That could also be part of it. But typically it is, I don't like how I look. That's typically the main driver. That's the biggest risk factor. So if you're getting very anxious about how you are presenting, staring in the mirror, having these types of things, that's where it typically begins. And then in the case of bingo, it can start out with playing bingo too, but you tend to start looking and you see that changes are occurring too. So I think it's hard to tell with bingo specifically where it begins, but I would say it's definitely not healthy eating tips, regardless. I think we can all agree on that.
About the chatbot recommending dieting or restricting a certain number of calories. Of course, we're never part of the chatbot that we developed or evaluated.
The National Ed Association is more interesting than any other ed charity because it's the most powerful. It has a seat at the table of multiple other organisations in the healthcare system, like the American Academy of Pediatrics. It gets consulted with by TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube as of 2023. That's who you have to thank for your horrible ed policies, which mean you can promote health at every size, misinformation, but you can't mention the words weight loss without risking age restriction.
Yes.
It's also the most interesting because it's the only ed charity that's been attacked by fat activists for many years for not being fat acceptance health at every size enough. This first episode will be an overview of why NIDA seems so confusing. It seems to flip-flop at first glance on what its stance on obesity is. There are different opinions and always have been within the people who are on the board of directors, which is the volunteer board who vote on who is the CEO and have the executive power by voting, and they vote for their president of the board and things like this. And the advisory councils also, who are also volunteers, who are experts, who convene and give their recommendations. Many people are in both. Those people have always had a mixture of beliefs about obesity, and they have always included a softer version of health at every size. I call it soft haze, in which you say, basically, of course, obesity is real. I'm not saying there's no such thing as obesity and that there is an epidemic. Obviously, look at the numbers. People are getting bigger, so obviously it's not all genetic. And yet, I also think that there are people who are supposed to be that fat. There are people whose genetic set point is that. And you know the difference by their metabolic markers. If they have high blood pressure.
Yeah, so what she's talking about, that's a very 2013 talking point that took me back to that time. And that was where they used to be, which I think it is a dangerous place to be because it's so bizarre. It kind of is similar to the food addiction narrative where it's like anybody can be addicted to it, but then you can suddenly not be, but you can suddenly become it, but we don't know what foods are, and you're just looking blind all the time. And there's no scientific evidence that this food is and that isn't to all people. That doesn't exist. So it's really bizarre and it gets kind of TR. So you have to think when you're thinking of things that way. Obesity exists and it's not all genetic. So for some people it's bad, but for some people it's okay because their markers are this and that. But it gets to that same TR logic where it's like everything is true and everything is false at the same time. And it's confusing. And it's important to pick that up. If you're not within the TR, if you're not within that issue, you have to pay attention. I think most people can understand that it doesn't make sense unless if they don't think about it deeply enough. And that's typically what we have happening, particularly in the United States. People that are normal do not give a crap about health. Health is not valued in the United States at all. Everything in the United States is just pop a pill, just go to your doctor, listen to what they say, don't do anything yourself, basically. That's basically how Americans think about health. Just throw money at the problem and that should fix it. Basically, that's how we approach it in the United States. Throw money, throw a pill at it, that's it. Don't talk about it otherwise because it's not important because we don't care about it. We're bored. So that's typically what you have. So the people who do care about it, who are going to be super deep into health and weight and all these things, they tend to have a toxic ritualistic issue because that's really the only types of people that obsess over this. And so they take over these institutions, particularly in the United States, because it is so undervalued on a cultural level. And I don't think Americans are always aware of how undervalued health is. And I mean value, not like financially. Like the fact that I have to say that is kind of crazy. But I have to, because if I say that, most Americans, for those of you guys who aren't American, most Americans will assume I'm talking like we don't put enough money into it. No, no, no. We put more money than anybody, basically. But we don't value it on an individual, familial, communal basis. And what I mean by that is we don't think we should try to be healthy. We don't believe that. In fact, you have constant messaging by these TR zombies, by people in the issue, that to care about health is healthism, that it's evil and oppressive to care about it. So you actually have an opposite incentive to not care about it in the United States in the way that it matters, which is what? Our individual behaviors, our communal behaviors, our familial behaviors, the behaviors within a household. We're told none of that matters. All that matters is the government. And by the way, there's no solution. Because if the government tries to do something, we don't like that. Look no further than the food dye conversation. Well, I don't like that. That's stupid. That's not going to change anything. It's a start. It's something. If you are looking for a government solution, it is the least controversial. It is the first step that could actually be realistically taken. And my God, look at the resistance in the United States. They don't want it to change. You're not going to change anything. I try to tell people that, and they don't understand. It's like, no, you have constant reinforcement, both by corporations and TR zombies, that will not allow any policy change. It will not happen. It will not happen. Look no further than the Mike Tyson ad. It freaked everybody out. Well, I don't like it. I don't like the way it was. I don't like Nothing is ever going to be perfect. You either want the government to do something or you don't. But what tends to happen in the United States is we just don't do anything. The goal is for nothing to change because we don't care about it. And that's what I try to talk about as an activist. I try to talk about we need to care about this. This is important. My fellow Americans, this is important. Nutrition is important. It's so frustrating.
If they have high triglycerides, this cluster of things, those are people who need to lose weight until they don't have those markers anymore. Not necessarily a specific body fat percentage, just until your blood markers are okay, and then you're however fat you're supposed to be at that point, which is bunk. Look into the myth of metabolically healthy obesity. You're still at great risk of heart failure, even with perfect metabolic markers on those standard routine tests. You still likely have fatty liver on ultrasound, you just haven't had it checked for, and joint problems and amyloid deposits in the brain and the hormonal disruption causing issues with reproduction, with endometriosis, etc. All of that happens despite those metabolically healthy markers that these people are thinking of. They are thinking of such a small number of tests. That's soft haze. It's still horrible. And I think that is probably the majority of the people who have been in charge at NEDA. For example, this 2005 copyrighted piece of writing by Kathy Cater, the two people who edited it, Doug Bunnell and Margot Main, were presidents of the board between 2001, 2007 sort of era. In the 50 years since weight was first framed as a, quote, problem with, quote, weight control cast as a solution, not only have EDs emerged to threaten those who are vulnerable, but rates of obesity and associated health risks have risen exponentially. That's important. The difference between soft haze and the modern radical haze you might be more familiar with is that the radical haze people will never admit that obesity can ever actually cause any problem. It's always a coincidence, or it's weight stigma, or it's weight cycling, or it's all made up, the data is fake. They won't even acknowledge that people are fatter. In some cases, the most extreme radical haze will literally tell you that no, everyone was just as fat in the past, but the fat people hid away. They were never in paintings, they were never in photographs, and people were afraid to leave their houses. These people are saying no, obesity is on the increase and it is associated with high risks of health problems. However, what they will also say is that some people are just supposed to be fat, and that the reason people are getting fatter is their attempt to not become fat. Framing the goal as eliminating.
So it creates very, like, it's that toxic ritualistic chain email logic. So if you don't send this email to 7 people, you're going to be cursed for 7 years. It's that type of thing. If you don't post this on Facebook, if you don't do this, that's going to happen to you. It's very superstitious. So because people are trying, that's why they're gaining, and that's why this. It's like, no, that's because those people are playing bingo. They are talking to bingo. They have a problem. And there's a problem that is completely neglected. It seems like those in the field are obsessed with conflating it with Mia. I don't know why. They're different. And it's like, if there's zero treatment for something, and in fact, it's left to run completely rampant in society, it might be a problem, because they're going to continue to promote other people to upsize. And you have to remember, I've talked about this in terms of the zombie horde. So when you're talking about it, a group of people that are DIS ordered, especially en masse, they want the population to be especially class 1 obese, because it's big enough to where those on the reductive side can more easily stand out, but it's not so big that those talking to bingo can't still stand out too, especially at severe levels. So that's the point. So like if somebody is severely in bingo, they're going to be very big, and they want that because it reinforces the problem. So I've had people try to accuse me of saying there's a grand conspiracy. There's all these shadow people communicating with each other, and they're conspiring to make obesity normalized. It's not really a shadow. They say it out loud, especially today. It might have been a shadow like 10, 15 years ago, but today it's like totally out there. They flat out say it constantly. So it's not hidden at all. It's just you're not listening. And I don't think that it is like a shadow cabal. It's more so just a zombie's gonna zombie. It's what a zombie's going to do. It's what somebody in the problem is going to do. Somebody in the issue that is unaware of themselves, they are going to promote it. They are going to push it onto other people. They can't help it. It's because of that saying, misery loves company. You ever heard that one? It's because it's so awful to be in the problem that you want to be surrounded by people who are also in the problem, so that you're encouraged to continue. Everything about it is a way to encourage you to continue, because the goal is to never leave it. Why is the goal to never leave it? Because you feel like if you leave the DIS order, you feel like you're going to die, especially at severe levels. Your whole life gets built upon it. Some people frame their whole careers over it. All of their social connections are based in it. It can be very difficult. The further you go, the worse it gets. And why it affects so many people on a communal basis is just the overall never-ending pressure to be obese, which you see constantly. And people will say, oh, that's not true. We're constantly told to be thin. That's also not true. You're told that if you're already thin. If you're fat, you're told to stay fat, which, by the way, most people are. So people are treated differently within the zombie horde. And if you are average, then yes, you are told to be thinner, because it's like people on the reductive, they want you to be on their side. It's like you need to stand out with me against all the fatties or whatever. That's how they feel about it. But if you're fat, they want you to stay fat. If you're obese, don't you dare try to not be. I'm telling you. And people are like, that's not true. Da, 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 da. There is such a social pressure to stay obese. Like, especially if you're coming from a huge size, it gets real sharp. Especially as you're about to leave obesity, people get pissed. Especially if you've shown the journey and you talk about caloric realism the whole way. You know, if you don't act like I'm just lucky. It just happened. I woke up and it just happened. Or I didn't mean for it to happen, right? If you don't talk about it superstitiously, if you're like, yeah, I have this goal and I'm executing it, they're going to come after you. Because why? Because they don't want it to become mainstream. They don't want people to know that it's possible. Which, yes, that sounds crazy because it is. To an average person, they're hearing me and they're like, what? But it's so obvious. I know. But to them, it's not. You're projecting sanity onto them. You have to understand. They don't view things the same way. It's a zombie. They view things differently. And it's very compartmentalized to this one area. And people don't understand that. So somebody can be totally sane on every other thing. And when the issue of weight comes up, a cal def, the gym, any of it, they go totally weird. Because that's where their insanity lies. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. So people, it's like you don't catch it all the time. But it's like, ask somebody who you suspect, ask them if they think calories matter. And I think you'll get some kind of monologue. Especially if they're within bingo, you're going to get some kind of monologue. You're going to get a dramatic interpretation. You're going to get this this dance or the quick, I'm just meant to be like this. This is my genetics. So you'll get some kind of dismissive thing or like a long monologue depending on how severe they are. So I'm telling you, and people are like, oh, and it's like, yeah. They really don't believe that it's possible. And because of that, if you attempt to shift it, you're attempting to, I call it walking on water. You're attempting to walk on water and they're scared you're going to drown because to them it's not possible. So if it's not possible in their mind, then the only way that you could try to weight normalize would be due to harm. So they have to stop you. Is it making any sense to you? Do you get it? And these people are in charge of NIDA.
Eliminating fatness is not only biologically naive and incredibly prejudicial, given those whose lifestyle are optimal while their bodies remain fat, it fuels worry about weight. That they will also then say, even those people who
It doesn't
would
inherently feel worry, though. If you remind somebody that it is in their control, it is a result of their actions, over and over and over again, no matter how many times they try to run from that, you tell them, no, it is a result of your actions. Over and over and over again. You have to say it repetitively. So that's another issue with this problem is people don't want to say the same thing 20 times. So it's like they don't understand how repetitive the DIS orders are. So the cure is also repetitive. The actual, the way to get out of it is just as repetitive. So I think a lot of these therapists and stuff, they think, well, I told them that, and they just are more anxious or something. So I guess it didn't work. It's like, no, you have to keep telling them. You have to say it 50 bajillion times. I mean, there's a lot of fields where you have to be repetitive, like being a teacher, you have to be repetitive. Being an activist, you have to be repetitive. Being a therapist, you have to be repetitive, But for some reason, with this issue, it's like, oh, we said it one time and they don't get it. So I guess that's it. I'm like, what? You don't ever have to tell somebody something 20 bajillion times before they understand it as a therapist? Like, that sounds odd to me. But for some reason, this is sacred. where it's like, oh, we tried once. I guess that's it.
Losing weight in a healthy way. They should not do it by actively trying to lose weight, such as calorie counting. They think that's terrible. They say just eat healthily and exercise, and any weight that is supposed to come off will come off. If it doesn't come off, it's not that you are not in a calorie deficit. It's just that your body is supposed to be that size. This is the majority position, it would seem to me, in NEDA to
And they
this
also think too, if you get to that size, you're automatically going to stay there forever. But that's not true. That's just what they want to be true. So they want that to be true because it fuels the problem. Do you get it? So that's a part of promoting obesity. So if you become obese, then you can't not be obese. If you can't not be obese, then you shouldn't ever try. If I'm telling you should never try, then I'm automatically promoting you staying that way. Do you see? Do you see the line of logic? That's what it is. And so now they're literally censoring us from talking about how to actually get out because they don't want people to get out of obesity. It's very... In American society today, they always talk about how being fat is so radical. Going from class 1 obese to not overweight in the United States at this current time is a radical act. It is literally radical. I'm not talking like, oh, I went from average, I was maybe a little bit chunky and then I got snatched. No, that's not radical. I'm not talking I was smo and now I was super morbidly obese. Now I'm just morbidly obese. No, that's not radical. I'm talking I'm class 1 obese and now I'm not overweight at all. That jump between those two, it's a radical shift in the United States today. And if you don't believe me and you're obese, go ahead and do it and see how much pushback you get. Because you will. You will. Maybe if you do it completely privately, but if you talk about it at all, people are going to be upset. And it's subtle. People are disturbed. It's bizarre. And it's because a lot of people have internalized this belief that it's impossible. So it's socially bizarre to the point where, like, if you do get to not be overweight, then people will like assume that you've always been that size forever. And if you tell them, they'll be like, but you don't act like a person that used to be fat. It's just odd. You don't act like this. What? It's weird. It's very, again, I'm talking specifically American. This is a very American issue, but it's coming for everywhere. So it started here, it's spreading from here. I'm sure you'd get similar results in Canada or Mexico. I don't know if it's just due to proximity. I don't know if there's something about North America. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. But it's especially bad in these 3 countries. So I'm telling you, people get upset. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It's just... they will do everything they can to discourage you, basically. Sometimes there's even subtle sabotage, like they'll start giving you food, things like that. Like they don't want it to happen. So I just want you to be aware so that you catch it and so that you succeed. That's what I talk about. It's not like people are going to like beat you up in the street for it, but you might get comments. They'll start to project a reductive issue onto you. They'll try to give you food. They'll tell you to stop outright. It's a lot of these things. It can be kind of subtle, but just be aware of it. That's all I'm telling you.
Douglas Bunnell is still to this day on one of the advisory councils, not just the Founders Council like all the early people are. Here he is, still there. But there are people on either side of that position. There are people who think that's already fatphobic, and there are people who will say that all of this is silly, and they somehow, I'll get to them in a minute, somehow those people are still in NEDA as well. The 9th of October 2002, there was the Prevention Guidelines and Strategies page, which included for parents, educators, coaches, and others who work with young people. Number 10 in their tips of how to prevent EDS in young people was link respect for diversity in weight and shape with respect for diversity in race, gender,
So look at that.
ethnicity, intelligence,
That's 2002.
etc. So even in 2002, my generation, the millennials, our parents were being taught by these AIDS charities that they should tell us we are racist and sexist if we don't want to be an unhealthy weight.
Yeah.
No dieting, risks and reasons
It goes
to
back
stop.
deep. It goes back really deep. In the United States, I would say the late 60s at least, if not the 50s. It goes back. So it takes a while to get to this level of insanity that we have here. And I don't really want other countries to be confident about this, because give it a few decades and you could be right here. You know, it's something that slowly happens. And it seems like in the US, we definitely had like this massive uptick in it after 2013, or like during that time frame, because I think it was around the time they classified obesity as a disease. Everything just got so much worse after that. So it got way worse. It like totally exploded and it went totally nuts. So just be very careful about something like that.
Americans spend more than $40 billion a year on dieting and diet-related products. No mention of how expensive it is to waste money putting more calories than you need into your mouth every day. And it's all the same stuff you hear today. Dieting rarely works. 95% of all dieters regain their lost weight and more within 1 to 5
2002.
years. Dieting can be dangerous. Dieting forces your body into STAV, you know what I mean, Asian mode. Nowhere does it mention anything about how to ask your doctor if you are actually overweight or not. No mention that that's even a thing. Next time the dieting desire crosses your mind, take a time out. Think about the reasons why you want to lose weight. Sure, that's fine. Are they really worth it? Think about the potential dangers of dieting. No, think about, are you actually overweight or
Right.
not? Bed often results in the same health risks associated with
And think
clinical
about
obesity.
the
And this was-
obesity rate in 2002 versus today. So I keep trying to tell you guys, this is where this stuff leads. It leads to here. It gets worse and worse and worse, and it builds. It's like the toxic ritualistic belief system. I told you guys, it's brick by brick. And it is group oriented too. So they're doing that on a societal basis, building it brick by brick with each year. So I'm telling you, it's important to talk about.
4th of August 2002, websites just gone live and they're already contradicting themselves. Sometime in maybe late 2023 to 1st of January 2024, they've completely removed the word obesity. This page now, the same bed page, no longer has the word obese or overweight at all. But interestingly, they've replaced the term obese with a higher waist circumference, which to me, am I just an idiot? That means kind of the same thing. If a higher waist circumference is part of metabolic syndrome, then that would imply to me that not all shapes and sizes are healthy. One of the first co-presidents of the board was Diane Mickley. They shuffled around the chair, the president, the vice president of the board of directors for a good 5, 6, 7 years. It was pretty much the same handful of people who had most of the power on the board, it would seem. And it was a big board. I didn't go into every single person. I think she had a good chance of steering this thing in the right direction. She might be why sometimes it was in the right direction on obesity ever in its history. The notion that a normal weight preteen or teen should want to diet, that should set off alarm bells. Not that she has an ED, but it's a potential risk. This was in 2016 she said this. I love the fact that she specifies normal weight,
Yes.
but even then doesn't mean they have an ED. Even then it's just
Yeah.
a potential risk. She has also studied the obesity effect on hip fracture rate compared to AN.
I think that's important
acknowledging
to consider too, is that it's not like every single person on the board believes the same thing. And that's also, I agree with Compulsive Rambler. That's why some of it has been conflicting, or why they say one thing but also the other at the same time. But it still creates confusion, which is bad. So, but yeah, I could see there being some Firefly members or some people who are trying to make a change within the organization, but it's very hard because they're probably very few compared to zombies, basically.
That obesity does increase the fracture rate of certain parts of the body, but even she suffers from the what I will call fear of causing AIDS by tackling obesity syndrome. She said in 1999, while we have an epidemic of overweight children in this country, I can't help but wonder if the fallout is going to be an even bigger subset of AN and BN adolescents. I can't tell you how many teens I work with who were told as kids they were chubby or fat one too many times. Points for calling it an epidemic. However, it is an example of the fear that I've noticed in people in this field. In 2005, she told CBS News,
I wonder too if it's a lack of understanding of what causes it too, because there is a huge stretch between being told you're overweight and developing a TR issue, especially from a young age. There's a lot of stuff going on within that. And I think we have such a pressure to only talk about, well, we were called fat one time as a kid, or maybe even many times because we were. But there's also often a lot of other things going on that we don't like to talk about because they're heavy, they're serious. And that's part of the motivation of having a TR issue, is that you don't have to talk about anything else. You don't have to talk about the unstable family that you were brought up in. You don't have to talk about the bad things that happened to you. You don't have to talk about, aspects of SA or, I don't even want to get any further into that. You don't have to talk about that stuff, right? You don't have to talk about substance abuse issues and things like that in the family where it causes instability. You don't have to talk about domestic DV. You don't have to talk about those heavy, serious things. We can just talk about our weight, and we can talk about how we were called fat. It's the same thing where sometimes people will develop a toxic ritualistic issue due to severe bullying. It's not just being called fat, it's the severe bullying that is traumatic. But we don't want to talk about that because that's serious. That's more real, And I think that that's one of the biggest drives, is that it can become a huge distraction. And when you start to understand that it is meant to be a distraction, that's the exact purpose of it, it makes so much more sense. Because if we just keep talking about it, if we talk about fat and fat and fat, they always talk about food noise. Let's talk about fat noise. If we keep talking about fat noise, then we don't have to talk about other things. And I think that can happen with food too. Food can also be a distraction. So it's important to consider that. Sometimes we talk about things like this so much because we don't want to talk about real issues. That happens all the time.
A culture that is fat phobic, that has unrealistic notions of how thin a body type ought to be and at what age. And that's important because it shows that people could use the language of, say, fat phobia.
When you start to bring up the culture as fat phobic narrative, that's bad. You've lost touch. Because again, maybe if you're already thin, but that's a huge qualifier. It's a huge qualifier that nobody talks about. And again, I'm specifically talking the United States, okay?
and not be full-blown haze or even that far on the spectrum. I don't see her as on the spectrum of haze from all this stuff I found on her. When you look down at the person that she is talking with in this article, she was co-president to Doug Bonnell, and Doug Bonnell is more radically haze, and I can see how they would not have noticed the difference because they're using the same language. They're both talking about fat-phobic culture and people want to be thinner than they should, and who's to say what one person means by thin is healthy weight? It may be, and someone else, when they hear, oh, people want to be thin, they think you mean underweight, and therefore people will interpret what you say in a way that makes it make sense in their own mind. And I think what happens is they
project sanity onto the person. So that happens all the time within these conversations, and I try to remind you not to project sanity onto somebody in these issues because they're not sane. So, and again, I get it. It can hide in plain sight. It can be something where it's like, well, they're totally sane with everything else. So, of course, I'm going to assume that they're sane with this. Of course you will. But it doesn't change the fact that when it comes to this issue in particular, it gets real bad.
Notice that you actually disagree for a long time because you're saying the same kinds of words but having different shades of meaning on them. For example, 2006, they had the Awareness Week theme of be comfortable in your jeans. And how would you interpret this? Too often individuals struggle against their natural genetically influenced size just to fit into that pair of skinny jeans in the back of their closets. Fighting your natural shape and
that's a TR talking point.
Size can lead to unhealthy dieting practice, poor body image, and sometimes EDS. While you can adopt a healthy lifestyle and aim to be fit for your particular body type, you cannot change your genes. And then there is no further elaboration on do they mean just bone structure, the length of leg versus torso, how wide your shoulders
which that would make sense, but you need to clarify.
Are and your pelvic bone is, how big these things can get if you eat properly as you're growing up, how large and heavy can your bones get versus how small and light are your bones given the same height and sex as somebody else, how does your body distribute fat, or do they just mean some people are supposed to be 500 pounds? You could read it either way. They were formed from 4 already large organisations and they've since picked up 2 more at least. And the intention was to create a unified force in the fight against ED. I don't think they've been that successful in terms of unified. But it was Craig Johnson who initially sat on their board of directors as the president. He was one of the main players in getting those organisations to merge. NEDA actually has an award named after him. He's no longer in any of the councils, but he is on the Founders Council, which basically everyone who was in the founding organisations when they merged. This guy is obviously a big deal because he also arranged the first meeting that led to the Academy of Ed. He's a co-author of this study, Treatment Outcomes for Adults in a Residential Program for Bed Spectrum Disorders. I don't think they take it that seriously whether patients with BED who are obese lose weight or not. Patients were weighed weekly or twice weekly depending on insurance requirements and symptom presentation, i.e. active PURG-ing was monitored more frequently with weights and labs. Why only the ones that were doing that? A case report suggested that having patients with these...
Which again, there's a huge conflation with talking to Mia, which it's not to say that that's not a problem, but it's to say that the problems are slightly different. They're slightly different, so they require a little bit of a difference in balancing. And I think it can be subtle, but it's really kind of easy. Let me just explain it to you real fast. So where somebody talking to Mia will have a fear of certain types of consumables, certain types of FOOD, somebody talking to Bingo will feel the same way about exercise. So that's basically like a shift. You see how that's similar but different. So when you're approaching it, how you would talk to somebody talking to Mia about, well, it's okay to try this and it's okay to try that and da-da-da-da-da, and maybe don't be too this, da-da-da-da. with somebody talking to bingo, you'd say the same thing about exercise. It's okay to try that. Why don't you give it a shot? Why don't you try that? Da 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 da. You don't have to force yourself to be inactive. You see? That's the difference. But they don't understand bingo. They just don't. Like, you don't have a fear of what you buy at the grocery store in bingo. You don't. Not really. You don't. But you do have a fear of exercise. And people don't understand that. So they treat it the same. But it's a little bit different. You're just trying to get to balance. With all of them, you're just trying to get to balance. And I believe that every issue requires nutrition, deep nutrition, upon diagnostic, upon fixing the issue. Each of them must be met with deep nutrient restoration, because if you're depleted, it's hard to be sane. I don't know what else to say. It's hard to think about things within the problem. It's hard to get out of it if your brain is foggy because you're so deprived, which each of the issues will cause deprivation in different ways.
Spectrum of BING conditions
And yes, I would say within bingo, depriving yourself of exercise is definitely deprivation too.
In treatment programs designed primarily for reductive EDs may be problematic due to differing focuses of weight restoration versus normalizing eating patterns. No, you should care about normalizing the eating patterns and the weight of all people with EDs. Craig Johnson, along with another early days ex-member of the board of directors, Olivia Bermudez, joined the large ED clinic Eating Recovery Centre in 2010 in an executive type of role and is still there. The Eating Recovery Centre is notoriously, unambiguously, unapologetically pro-health at every size. When he joined it, they actually used to treat obesity. They would never say this now, but look at all the things they used to treat. A centre for treating ED, mood, anxiety, and obesity. And they talk about weight gain as a consequence of compulsive overeating here. This was 2016. Does this mean that Craig Johnson necessarily changed it over time into a more pro-obesity clinic like we see today, as he joined it in 2010, right? And in 2016, they still had that on their website. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It could actually be that he joined the clinic because it was already super pro-obesity. Possibly. I can't prove that, but let me show you what I mean, where it's possible that they always were thinking that and saying something else. This is a blog post from 2017, actually about a presentation that was delivered at a NEDA conference, which was done in conjunction with BEDA, a different ED charity, which we will go into a lot more in the next video because BEDA and NEDA merged, and it gets really interesting. But I just want to lightly touch on, in this conference, it was said that during the talk, there was a slide highlighting the weight stigmatizing language used by ED treatment centres. The founder of one of the centres quoted on the slide happened to be in the room. When it came time for Q&A, she said she felt the need to defend her clinic and herself. I won't claim to remember every word she said, but the gist of it was that their clinic believes that they need to use that kind of language to, quote, get people in the doors, that people are looking for weight loss, and that's how they get people to their site. The same person implied that doctors won't refer their patients to their programs if they don't talk about weight loss, and that it helps people seeking weight loss to be interested in their program. She said that they are doing this because they want to help people, and this is how they reach people, but they don't actually prescribe or encourage intentional weight loss when the people are in the program. So there you have it.
They're subversive. They lie. Oh my God, that is horrifying. So is this a shadow cabal? No. You just gotta look.
back in 2017, when we say on the website that we help you lose weight, we don't really mean it. We just are tricking people and their doctors into coming here for treatment for their overeating problems, but we don't actually help them lose weight. That's all just bait and switch. Wow. Okay, so that's a thing that was happening. Just bear that in mind when you think about Craig Johnson then. So he joined this place in 2010. All the way through to 2016, they were saying that they treated obesity. And then a few years later, right, remember 2016, they were still saying that. This conference happens in which all those clinics get called out in a big public way at a NEDA and BEDA conference, which would have had a lot of, influential people going to it and then coming back and reporting to their own respective clinics and charities and things. And soon after that, I noticed, 2017, 2018, 2019, all these clinic websites, not just Eating Recovery Centre, but a lot of them, that's when they really dropped the obesity word hard. They stopped talking about that, and they seemed to publicly go way more haze. So that could be what happened here.
Those conferences, they're what I would call on my channel bloater conferences. So there's people there that they push talking points and they spread it. So like I've said, I think I'm gonna leave it here for now, just because the video is getting long, but I knew this was gonna be detailed, so we have to talk about it. What I'm gonna say is people within the issue are organized. They absolutely are. People don't understand that. They don't get it. I understand that you don't get it. I understand you never had this issue. I understand that you don't think that people organize. You think that it's an individual struggle. It's not. That's part of what makes the toxic ritualistic so complicated, is it is not just internal, it is also external and social. It's socially reinforced, it is externalized onto the public, and it is an internal struggle. So even if you isolate somebody, they could still struggle. So it just makes it even harder to deal with. And as I said, people with these issues, they get into these fields en masse because most people in the United States do not care about health. They don't care. So if you're a normal person in the United States, your likelihood of actually caring about the issue of weight is much lower than in other countries because our cultural values do not give a crap about health at all. So think about that. That's our cultural basis. You combine it with the organizing of people in the issue, the obsession with these topics of people in the issue, and then they get into these fields and then they literally conspire to make it worse. So it technically could be a shadow cabal, but again, this is literally online. They do write it out. They do say it. So it's not like super secret or anything. It's also very obvious if you just open your eyes, which for most people that I'm talking to in this video, I just want you to care about this because it's important. It's affecting a lot of people and it is normalizing obesity. It's not even normalizing it. It is keeping it normalized. So let's not buy into this notion that obesity isn't already normalized in the United States. It already is, and it has been for quite a while. But it definitely got worse. I would say after 2013, that's when I noticed it getting worse. And we have to stop this, basically. So thank you so much to Compulsive Rambler. I'm going to continue this next week. I will talk to you all soon. Have a good rest of your day, night, etc.